Confusion matrix.
The confusion matrix. Confusion.
Welcome to our Yet to Be Named podcast, on which we'll discuss various things relating to data technology, and AI. We decided to kick this off before we decided on the title because we know it's going to take us a little while to figure that out. So here we go. And we're going to have a brief discussion about why we're doing this and what this is. And then we will just plow on. We should do some introductions. So I'm Alex Lovelace. I'm a data professional.
And I'm Pete Hodge, and the same.
We think we know stuff about data, which is why we're doing this. I guess we'll let the audience decide whether that's true or not, but we certainly talk a good game. So that's why we're here. And so I think this has come about because we meet regularly, remotely. I'm based in Scotland and Pete is based in London. And we talk about things, data, and all sorts of other things as well. And we observed that we think we say good things. And so we, a while ago, started recording those and transcribing them. So we keep tabs on what we've been saying and what we think about stuff. And it occurred to us we should probably, release some recordings. So we're going to start here and do that. Anything else to add to that, Pete?
Like you say, we kind of know some stuff about data, and I guess ultimately we have a belief in it. You know, we look at data. The reason we're in the data field is because we know that it can be very enlightening, shows you stuff and gives you a way of looking at the world which you don't always have when you're just in the world. And sometimes it's good and it's really useful, and sometimes it doesn't help at all. But in terms of business and so forth, we definitely find it useful. It's always going to be enlightening. It gives you a different view from perhaps where you're entrenched. And I think it's just important that, we believe that's true, and that's why we like talking about it.
Yes, well, we do. And we like data and we like analysing things. We're curious people and we have skills. It's interesting that you say that, data is valuable, but I think one of the things that's going to come out at some point is that we might believe that data and analysis is important. The client doesn't always agree. And the recipient of the data doesn't always agree that it's valuable, or more often would agree that it's interesting and useful and then do nothing with it because it's politically inexpedient to do so. I don't think we should get that deep in today because we want to start somewhere perhaps a little more universal. But I think the format of these going forward is me and Pete turn up with what we've got on our mind and we talk about it. We will not discuss it in advance, and you will get the raw feed of our general angsty and erudite view of the data and AI world. And I suspect we're going to spend a lot of time talking about AI because it's everywhere and we have mountains of opinions on it. So I think that's introduction enough. So I think we should just plow in. What do you got?
Well, I was very much in the AI world, and it's just a couple of comments that come up over the last week from various sort of friends of mine. And one was, well, Elon Musk says, we'll have, and I don't quite know whether she was saying AGI, but, AI is taking over by 2040. And then I was out with a mate of mine last week, and he was much the same. He said, we're not getting anything now, but in the next 20 years, jobs are going to be decimated. And, this is quite commonly held opinion. And I know we've talked about this before. And because we're very, very close to this, we're like looking at it going, yeah, no way, and we took some numbers that Anthropic published a couple of weeks ago, and you go beneath the surface sort of graph, and you go, you can draw several conclusions here, and people are drawing the most hyperbolic conclusions they can. So I sort of feel stuck in a bit of a weird place where being close to it, I feel like we're being cynical, but I'm curious, and also sort of look at these people and I don't think they're wrong. And you also mentioned a friend of yours who, now essentially has just swapped OpenAI app on their phone for Google, and we were both like, "No, why would you do that?" And they're just apparently quite happy
Well,
with it,
so
and
that's
much the same is happening.
so that was what I had two things to bring to the table, and that was one of them. I'm pleased you didn't name the individual,
Indeed,
because I'm not sure they would be amazingly pleased about
yeah,
being used as a positive or negative example for this. But to
yeah,
be clear, they're using the OpenAI app. We were discussing this over a nice Mexican meal recently, and it was like, and it's great because it remembers me. It tailors its responses. So they were looking for things to do in the place that we were in, and it came back with a bunch of drinking related stuff, right? Automatically. And given we were in a place that was particularly known for its antiquities, this shows that ChatGPT knows them, right?
yeah,
And um, my immediate response is that ChatGPT is stateless. It doesn't remember you, right? And she goes, "No, but it does, like it does. And look at this, and look at these responses." I was like, "Oh, okay, it must be doing that." What I hadn't clocked was that, and then I went and refreshed the GPT app because I hadn't used it for ages on my phone, and the first thing it comes up with is an option to switch on memory effectively, which means it's storing some sort of either it's storing your whole history and ferrying that back and forth as part of either the system prompt or the user prompt, and or it's packaging that up into an embedding and using that as part of the query. But I don't really know. But it does remember you now, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so that was my second response when she told me about this. My first response was, why? Right? Why would you do that? They're probably all made up, right? Which when we're talking about hyperbolic attitudes, that's
Mm.
also one, right?
Yes, yeah,
Um,
exactly, yeah.
we did end up in another drinking establishment thanks to uh, ChatGPT, which was very pleasant, and we had some nice cocktails. But it was very
Excellent.
expensive. Yes, well, as you do, right? So, yeah, so I was like, that sounds mad to me. It's just switching out Google with ChatGPT. I mean, but there was no question here. Oh, I know it's going to be a bit inaccurate and make things up, but I get this benefit from it. It didn't even seem to be a question. No more Google. I use ChatGPT now, and I just blew my mind, blew my
Yeah.
margarita addled mind.
Well, and that was the thing. And so I wanted to, it made me think, because I also went on a bit of a rant with one of these people I was chatting to, and I'm like, nah, these things aren't going to, from where we are now to where these people are saying it's going to be, it is so large that I can't see it getting there. I think it's the three things all within quick succession, and I'm not one to be, I like to have an opinion, but then you also like to think, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm a bit too close to things here. And so this week, so at the back of my mind, I've just been sort of, thinking, well, one, does it really matter that these models maybe aren't very good, because actually if what you're comparing it with isn't very good, you just got two lots of not very good at things. Let's face it, what we all do without realizing it is you look up something on Google, for example, you get a bunch of results back, you sort of scroll through. If you don't find what you want, you either go into the next page, change your search, or you give up, or you find some other way. But you forget that interaction because we're so used to doing it. I'll quick look, or ask Siri, or I'll do something, and you don't get the answer you want. You just sort of ignore it, and certainly for myself, I don't log that in my memory and think, oh, I was trying to use Google and it was no good. I just find an answer. So I started to think, well, so does it matter if people just start using it? Does it matter with some of the things that we're doing to give the contrast to that is, if you're trying to build a system that does, like Apple's trying to do, that summarizes things and that goes out directly to people, and you say, here's something that summarizes, and it gets it wrong, one in not many thousand. Now for us it might not be so bad, but you look what's happened to Apple. It's summarizing news. I mean, let's say it's getting one in a 100, 1 in a million wrong. Apple's got 3 billion customers or something, so that's a lot of wrong news stories, and they had to pull that summarization, because of exactly that. So we're here saying, so to get around that is a pretty hard problem with how the models are at the moment, and yet people are using it, and I'm sort of stuck thinking, well, is there a way for? I mean, definitely, part of what we do is find ways forward. But when we're this close to it, seeing a world where 3/4 of my job is being done by a computer is just nonsensical. It's just not going to happen, from where I sit right now. But what I'm questioning is, well, is that true? They say about predicting the future, people often overestimate, the next 5 and underestimate the next 20. And I'm thinking, well, in 20 years, is it doing 3/4 of my job? Don't know.
Well, it depends on what your job is, doesn't it? But and what is your job, Pete? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
actually
Yeah.
keeps changing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the job we thought we had, 4 years ago, it sort of has changed.
Yeah.
But so there's so many nuances here, and there's so many
Yeah.
different directions you can take this conversation, because there is this expectation difference, and this is, I think, what we've been saying from day one. If you're working around statistics, machine learning, AI analysis, the difference between a 90% accuracy rate, whether or not that's acceptable, is wholly and dramatically dependent on the project itself, right? So if what you're doing is trying to sort, like the classic use case of IMDb reviews into romance and horror, and you've got I love it if there was a 90%, 10% failure rate on that. That'd be really funny. But it's not a big deal if you get the odd one wrong, right? But when we get into medical diagnostics and stuff, what I mean, it's like, no, that's not okay, right? There's so many use cases where even 1% is wholly unacceptable, like drone strikes and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it becomes down to the context. So would we perhaps have ended up in a cocktail bar that didn't exist, i.e. stood outside it going, we hate you, chat GPT? Well, probably not, because it's unlikely we wouldn't have visited the website and found that it didn't exist, right? So highly unlikely. And also, even if we had taken it on face value and gone, oh, it's just down there in Joe Bloggs Street,
Yeah.
let's just walk down there and go to this place, and it wasn't there. That's again, it's not a big deal. Now, how many years have people been complaining about Google Maps taking them through some farmer's land on a dirt track in their little mini car and getting stuck in the mud because Google thought that was an appropriate route?
Yeah.
It's been the bane of many a driver for a decade probably now. And so, okay, in this particular example, I mean, is it worse than Google? Well, as you point out, the experience is better, and given how bad Google's getting and being stuffed with adverts, and does it perform better? Arguably, yes, right? I mean, you still got to root through stuff on Google, and that restaurant or cocktail bar could have closed last week, and it just hasn't updated in Google's index yet. So, is it from this particular human's perspective? Was it a valid trade-off between Google and ChatGPT? Well, I actually at that point was like, no, chat, you can't do that. That's bonkers. But then I was actually you're probably fine, right? You've got
Yeah.
an error tolerance that's actually quite high, right, for this use case. But then I was like, but look, if I'm coding, which is what I would use it for quite a lot, although I'm going to come
Yeah.
back to my second point is around AI and coding. We'll come back to later. But if I say give me a function or a script that does X, something reasonably multi-stepped or complicated, it comes back, gives me some really convincing looking code. I run that and it either chucks an error or doesn't run or something. It's non-trivial for me to react to that. It might be obvious what the problem is, but I've still got to go in there. I've got to look. I've got to go through what there was the error, but that's what the error is triggered.
Mm.
Where's the actual problem? And then it's something in the logic, and actually go all the way through it. And that, the most common ball ache I have specifically with ChatGPT is when I forget that I shouldn't be using it for certain tasks, and one of those is getting it to write code for its own API, right? Because GPT-4o's index model is out of date for their own API, and so we'll put in functions that don't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it might take me 10 minutes to hunt down for, oh god, this is a different function. And it might even just be a case of changing the name of the function. Oh, that's right now. It usually isn't, because if you change a function name, you probably changed its calling signature and all of that. So now I've lost 10, 15, 20 minutes, in longer than it would have taken me to cobble together the code myself, right? So no,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
using it for coding very much. Again, I'm going to come back to this one, but it's so use case dependent. And then when you
Yeah.
extrapolate that out to it's going to be doing my job, well, which job, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can we predict which jobs are going to get eaten by it to a degree? Can we predict when? No. And also everyone's going like, oh, my whole job's gone. Well, I
Yeah.
find that highly unlikely, right? I
Yeah.
think it will be used to reduce the size of workforce, but
Yeah.
do whole families of job disappear? Some, but very few in my mind.
Yeah. No, exactly. And there's, I was sort of thinking back to other great technological changes over the last sort of 30, 40 years. Sounds like quite a long time, many of which I've now experienced, and some of which I've been on both sides of. And just even, the PC itself, I started work where there were computers, but the people didn't have desktop computers, and they were few and far between, and there was a typing pool, and which just seems laughable. So you would dictate a letter, and then you'd take the tape, and someone would type that up, and then give you the letter, which you would then read and get it retyped if it was wrong, or sign and send out, and then that all disappeared when you got a PC on your desk with a word processor that was hooked up to a printer, which was suddenly superseded in a very short time by this thing called email, where, well, we don't need to print letters at all anymore. But what happened in the shift there was you had someone who was in quotes expert typist. That's all they did all day. and so were very, very quick at their job, very, very efficient, and probably very low error rate. And then you gave the rest of the office, another 50 people, the ability to do that, and then actually you told them they have to do it. And in the early days, there was no auto spell checkers, and things have got sort of better. But I think there's an argument there to say, well, you've got a bunch of experts doing this really well, but there's like, 1 to 15 people or something. And they given that task to the 15, the one person's job gone. And actually, I'm pretty sure you'd argue that the quality of those letters was probably way below what the expert did. But again, it
Yeah.
comes to your point, which was, and so what was the tolerance on that? Well, it turned out people didn't really care that much. And fast forward another
Well,
30, and people don't even write in full sentences anymore. And we've all got to do it in 140 characters. You
yeah,
know
well,
what
exactly. You got emojis, right? And
I
so
mean? Exactly. Yeah.
and if you'd asked that bowler hatted, suitcased businessman that
Yeah.
had his his secretary that typed things out for him, if you'd asked him at the point where this change was sort of tipping over, um, he would have likely been a him, and he would have likely told you, no, no, you can't do this. This is, writing clear letters and messages and memos is essential for good communication, politeness, and British decorum. And that didn't take long to get beaten out. And um, as you say, now you can, communication's got incredibly terse. But when I was at school, I was taught how to write letters, right? Dear
Yes. Indeed.
sir or madam, thank you for blah blah blah,
Yeah.
XXYZ, yours sincerely, or yours something. And there was like, which one are you supposed to
Hopefully.
say?
Yeah.
In these scenarios you say sincerely. In
Yeah.
this scenario you say faithfully. I didn't have a bloody
Yeah.
clue, right? I really didn't. And then you have a little gap in, and you put your name, and you put
Yeah.
your address in the top right, and their address in the left.
Yeah.
All this stuff we were taught, and now I can send a one-word email, right?
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and that's it, it's done. And some would argue the art of letter writing is lost, and that's a bad thing. And I, if you look at sort of the historical record, some of the most interesting things written in text that humanity has is letters between interesting people. And meanwhile, that same conversation happens over Slack now, or WhatsApp, and it's lost to the world, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I would agree with that, but to your point, would we have kept secretaries for that reason? Well, no, right? We've lost something in this
Yeah.
transition, but that's a very complicated transition. A lot of things have gone on there, and an email is not equivalent to a letter, right? And a text is not equivalent to an email, and a text is not equivalent to a messenger, right? WhatsApp and SMS are not directly interchangeable. They are subtly different in their use and their format, and
Yeah.
and there's too much nuance in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the other thing that makes me think of, which we've seen time and again with technology, is that you take that expert thing and you make it available. Now, if that's useful at a lower level of quality, then people pick it up. It makes me think of cameras and camera phones. Now we still have photographers now, and but everyone likes to take everyone can snap a photo, and so that works. And the other thing is, well, like you said, when we talk about jobs, well, what do you do in your job? Well, a typist back in the day typed, not being funny about it, but really 90% of their job was typing. Got to walk down the office. Yeah, you got to communicate with people a little bit. Yes, there's probably something about being able to listen with headphones to the words coming through the dictaphone. And that was your job. Now, I mean, some people's jobs are maybe like that. Certainly in the IT world, I mean, yeah, you code,
Yeah.
but that you also got to understand. You've got to go and speak to people and understand what the problem is. You've got to go and do your coding. You've got to come back, say what your problem is and why it's not working. You've got to think about databases. You've got to translate that into what the business is doing. And now people have different variations of this. You then got to go into a meeting. Well, if you're a person that only did meetings, then you're probably going to get replaced. But as we all know, working in office, we all have way too many meetings and no one's an expert in it. And it's always just an add-on. And how many things in people's jobs are they doing which they either shouldn't be doing or have to do, but it was never in their job spec. You don't roll up to a job interview and say, oh, I mean, they might say, oh, can you use office tools? But do they really say, oh, can you, okay, if you're going to go and be an accountant, they might say, do you use Excel? But Excel gets used for loads of things it wasn't designed for. But no one says, oh, can you use PowerPoint to create presentations? Yeah, they do a little bit, but no one's testing you on it. Yet all these things you have to know. And so if AI replaces, slides and PowerPoint, well, great. But that was only ever like 2% of my job. It might have been an important 2% on any given day, but it wasn't the whole day and it wasn't my whole job. So yes, it's done part of my job, but that just gives me more time to go and do the bits I'm supposed to be doing, like analysing data. So I think that it probably has a big forward.
I mean, this is a huge conversation, and it won't be the last time we come back to it. I think you just compared coders to typists, which I thought was quite a bold move. But I'll say this: I mean, being able to type well, given the keyboards that we have, is quite a skill, right? It's fucking cool. Right, I'm in awe of people who can type well. I can't. My son, who's 18, and he's like, digital native or whatever we're calling them these days, and there's more than one website you can go to that teach you touch typing, and you have it. And both my sons. My other son is 16, and you kind of you type and it shows you where you typed and it reports your errors, right? And your speed, errors and speed, right? Which is basically how they would have gauged typists in secretarial pools, right?
Yes, yeah.
And he got really good at touch typing, right? And he considers that really valuable. And then I introduced him to the wonderful concept of Vim and Vim bindings. Vim being the Unix/Linux text editor that I use almost exclusively, because it was developed to enable people to write into text files on remote servers where you didn't have a mouse. And so the whole ethos around Vim is that you don't take your fingers off the keyboard. So if you can already touch type, the whole thing is that Vim has got a shortcut for absolutely everything, and you can create your own shortcuts and you can create your own macros in real time that repeats things, and it's by far, and I mean by far, the most efficient and fast way with working with text files. I simply don't know anything that comes close, but it's a ball ache to learn. Right, it's really, really hard. But he's already sort of in this, realizing the value of being able to use Vim bindings, because you can get them all over the place now, like in browsers and everything. There's a whole software package that makes extrapolating or integrating Vim bindings into any type of text prompt relatively easy. So you can use it on Jupyter, for example. But which I think is marvelous, right? So typing is still valuable, and being people who can type code quickly will be out of a job, because ChatGPT is going to do it all for you. Which brings me on to my item.
Yeah.
So this has all happened literally this morning. I was thinking about an intro for this podcast that we're recording right now, and I've got a bunch of images. You'll know my image mangler ones. We'll talk about the image mangler at some point, but a lot of these cool mashed up images that I've got thousands of, and if all over our business website and stuff. And I was like, well, I think I'd like to sort of see like all these sort of flashing up, right, sort of chaotic things, and find a bunch of those images that are sort of data related and
Yeah.
technology related, and then with pictures of us interspersed, right? I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this will be what we use. But I was like, well, I want to do this. I've already got the images, good, and I can create more easily because I've got an algorithm to do it. And I was like, well, what I want is to create actual grids of 4x4 grids of these. They're all square.
Yeah.
And it sort of apes the introduction to one of my other podcasts called Creative Squares. And I quite like how Mark, who did that, I want something sort of a bit like that. But I was like, so I could get these images and I can create grids of them. I don't know, in any number of programs, I guess, like Photoshop or GIMP or whatever, and then I could cut and paste the load into iMovie or Descript, and then just have them as really short snippets or whatever, right? And I was like, oh, that's going to be a ball ache, right? So I thought, nah, bollocks, there's got to be a way of doing this programmatically, right? So two tasks. One, gridify to get these 4x4s, but in theory, 3x3s, 2x2s, 3x3s, 4x4s, right? And two, create a video that stacks these all in a row, right? Just create me a slideshow, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, I'm not writing that code. So here's my product plug, which is I use Warp Terminal for everything.
Yeah.
Which is a brand new Linux type terminal, but you can use. Actually, I don't know if you can use PowerShell stuff, but everything's moving to Linux style terminals anyway. This has built-in Gen AI, as well as a bunch of other cool features like command notebooks and loads of cool. It's developing at a rate of knots, and I'm in the beta program for it, luckily, because I just opted in. And with the beta program, you get free Gen AI calls, right?
Yeah.
So I can do anything I want, and they're not going to charge me for it. Beta program's great. I'm on a Slack channel. I can feed my any issues I've got or like feature requests and stuff. They're really nice. I talked to them at some point. They interviewed me anyway. So I was like, I'm going to see if Warp can handle this. And you literally go into the command line, hit Command I, and it brings up a Gen AI prompt. And I stuck in it, well, this is a directory, it's got a bunch of images. Can you create a bunch of image grids from this that will be, the amount of images in it defined in the command line, output file, all this stuff. Just that it was literally one line, right? Do that. And so the latest update of Warp plugs into GPT 1.0. You can choose like Gemini or GPT 4.0 or whatever, but it's got this new feature. It's called, I'll have to check, but it's got this cool new feature that is called Dispatch, right? And it gives you an option to dispatch this to GPT 1.0, and GPT 1.0 reasons it out, comes back with any clarifying questions, and then gives you an execution plan, right? An itemized execution. Here's what I'm going to do. Does this sound okay? It'll ask if it needs to check anything. Can I just have a look in this file? Can I have a look in this directory? Ask you permission, and just hit enter, enter. And you also have the option to say, no, just go do it, right? But it did all of this. I scanned it, was like, seems reasonable. Bam, did it. And then it ran it, and it was done, right? That whole thing was done, right? That took me probably 10 minutes, right? And then I was like, okay, let's go with the video. I have no idea whether you can do this with video. I just assumed that it'd be possible to write a Python or a shell script to create a slideshow. And I said, can you make all of these images into a slideshow and give me the ability to say how long to display each image for? And, input, output file, all that stuff. And again, one line, and it just goes off. It goes, ask me a few questions. I responded, created an execution plan, then created this, and created my video, and it was spot on, right? The only issue I had was that the one of the models it was using uh, didn't respond, so they hadn't handled one of the errors properly, and I sort of had to restart the
Yeah.
session, can do that again, basically. But outside of that, this all took me about half an hour. In terms of the effort that I put into it, it took me 20 to 30 minutes, and
Yeah.
um, and so it took me longer because once it had done that, I was like, oh, right, right. So I can do that. Okay, good. So what? Oh, that gives me an idea. Then I'll do it slightly differently. And what if I can do this? And then I'll create a new. And so I've got like it's just popping with ideas and going. Oh, I just can do this, right? And I've got enough to work with already. I could just do what I originally wanted, but now I'm like, oh no, okay, we can do better than this. And
Huh.
I've got the editing tools at my disposal. Worsh's iMovie or Descript has some really good features for doing this type of stuff. So anyway, we spent a lot of time, and anyone who tunes into this will find us moaning about AI a lot, right?
Huh.
Because and I think we need to have a whole long discussion on why Gen AI is a nightmare for coders, but not today, because I'm going to tell you that this was the first time I've used Gen AI almost completely seamlessly to do something quite complicated, and it was
Yeah.
just lovely. I was really pleased. So it's partly yay for Gen AI, and partly Warp Terminal is amazing because this isn't just them chucking prompts over to the model. They have some really well refined prompting strategies going off in the background there, and the orchestration into the terminal, the feedback from the model, the input and the output. I mean, it's just so good. There are problems. This is a beta program. There's still creakiness. There's some issues. Some features shouldn't be not quite as good as they should be. But I mean, this is transformational. So is this going to take my job? Hell no. Does this make my life a lot bloody easier? It will make me much more productive,
Mhm.
providing I didn't just hit on the one use case that it can actually do, and everything else is a pile of crap. And also one last thing, because I'm not monologuing now. I went and looked at the Python code that it wrote. Was actually pretty good. I sort of don't care, right? But
Yeah.
the sort of the one criticism I always had is that I forgot to tell it to put a command line flag for the input file, right? And so it hard coded that, and I'm like, really? You know what I mean? I told you to do it for everything else, so you just hard coded that one as opposed to asking me whether I wanted that, right? And that's the
Yeah.
model's fault. That's not Warp's fault. But
Yeah.
otherwise, the coding was nicely modular, probably a little bit too monolithic, but some really nice touches, some quite sophisticated coding, and I was like, but that's good enough, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Positivity from me on AI
Yeah.
there.
Well, yeah. Well, I've always said, I know that this is where it comes into the human reaction to that is when it. I mean, we discount the amazingness of it because once you've got it to do something, so 2 years ago, ask a computer to write code, and I don't know what you're going to get back, some sort of template or something. I don't know. Well, was there even anything writing code? I don't know. Um, but if it was, it'd be
Just as
writing it
I
off
mean,
of
auto suggestions on IDEs and stuff, I think is the
yeah.
closest.
So and then or if we look at a non-coding example, go and write me a story or write me a letter to my boss that says these things, or write a cover letter for my CV, that sort of stuff. And again, you had templates before, but now it can whack it out with the detail you give it. And when you look at the nothing from something, it's wow, and then if it gets it right and it's good enough, it's sort of double wow. And then you get this kind of halo effect, and then you go and you go and try again, and it's not quite as good, and you're a bit forgiving. And then, of course, the problem we've had is, we're hammering them you know, quite a lot, and we're expecting, right, okay, I need you to write code to do this, and it comes back and it's not, we're now over the fact that it can write code. Now we're judging on how good the code is, and has it modularized it in a way which is suitable for the future. And well, you didn't ask it that, and it didn't do it, and it hasn't, and now it's slightly annoying, and then you start to, as you get into it more and more, and so the halo sort of wears off, and then someone comes along and says, I just used it the other day and it just is a really good thing for me. And you go, yeah, no, it does do those good things. And it's holding the two at the same time, which is, if you get the odd right use case and it does some good stuff for you, it is really good. And let's not forget the fact that it's amazing that it can even get part of the way there. But, in fairness to the grumpy side of things, it's like, yeah, but you don't get away with doing your job by just doing like the most basic thing you can and handing it in. Yeah, maybe when you're new to a job you do, and then you've got to get better at it. And that's where the frustration starts to come in, because, you've got to get better, you've got to get nuanced. And then when you go and ask it again 2 months later, well, it's forgotten all that improvement and nuance and gives you the basic again. And well, that's not good enough now. Now I need you to be infinitely better, which we know you can train it to be. But, is the average Joe going to know that, you need to store your previous knowledge and stuff? How do you access stuff from 2 months ago? A whole bunch of other questions come. So I think you're right. I think there are use cases where it works really, really well. And I think that does blind us a bit. But also if you keep pulling that thread, doing something which you don't often do, or how often are you going to ask it to do that? Well, you're probably never going to ask it again, and it's done it well enough for you. So definitely gets really good marks for that. But if your job was to produce 9x9 grids of images, you'd probably be cursing it in 3 days' time.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the point. It's good at one-shot jobs. Ultimately, had I not had this facility, would I have done what I was intending to do? No. Right? Has the world lost out because of that? No. Are we going to get something cool because of it? Hopefully. Would I have produced something equally as cool some other method? Yes. Yes, I have confidence in myself. Does it any of this matter very much? No, we don't need a leader. We don't need opening credits. It's just not that important, right? So this podcast doesn't need to exist, right? So it's all a little bit theoretical, but as you point out, were I to be building out an application that creates these videos, that coding is not good enough, right? And it didn't think about it in those contexts, because I sort of didn't tell it to. And now, this isn't the first time I've tried to do something like this, right? I've tried countless times to integrate Gen into my coding workflows, and ended up it's being more trouble than it's worth. And it's not the first time I've tried to use the agentic way like this. Because there are other plugins for things like for terminals, and there's obviously Copilot and stuff. Again, they've not really helped me outside of small one-off or lazy, I can't be bothered to write this boilerplate stuff. It's great for that. And so this is value add, absolutely, right? But does it make the next involved, modular, complicated development task significantly easier? Not yet, no. I just can't see it, right? I still have to architect that out. I still have to think how I want it to work and what the UI and API for it is going to be, blah, blah, blah. So we're not anywhere near there yet, right? And so who have I put out of a job by using Warp to do this today? Well, no one. But I have helped Warp, because I'm on the beta program. They'll see what I've done, and hopefully helping improve their product, and I'm advertising it for
Yeah.
them now as well. So maybe
Indeed.
I've created a job because of this that's going to get seen by millions of people who are all going to rush off and download, because Warp is now available for Windows, right? They're all going
Right.
to download it, and then Warp are going to hire more people. So generative AI has created jobs right here. You heard it here
Indeed, yeah.
first, folks. Right.
Yes.
I think we I sort of think we should leave it there, because I
Yeah.
think we could get
Yeah.
lost in a dungeon of AI moaning. And I think next time we should try and talk about something that isn't AI. Imagine,
Yes.
right?
Indeed.
There are other things.
Yeah.
They exist.
Yeah.
So come
Yeah.
prepared to not talk about. I mean, if we really wanted to challenge ourselves, we'd do an episode where we literally ban any reference to AI and see how far we get. It'd be like a 5-minute long episode, probably.
Yeah,
We'll talk
exactly.
about what we have for lunch, and then that's it,
Yeah.
right? And then you find actually somehow AI had some input on your lunch choice or something.
Yes.
Anyway, there you go. Anything
Brilliant.
else to bring
No,
to the
no,
table
that's it,
before we
really, yeah.
sign off?
No, it's all good.
Okay, let's kill it. I thought that was marvelous first episode. People are going to come back in droves. I don't
We
know
hope.
when we're going to record or release the next one. Follow, like, review, rate, share it on social media, write a companion, record a companion video telling the world how good this is, and use Gen AI to do all of that. And we'll see you next
Indeed.
time.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.
Confusion.